Hello folks, my name is Bella Bennett and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected our brave little state of Vermont. Excuse me while I learn how to use this Screencast-O-Matic. Wonderful. So, as you've certainly, I'm sure, heard, Vermont has gotten a lot of praise over the past 8 or so months about how we've, as a state, dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. This is due to more strict social distancing policies, limited restaurant and store patronage, etc., as you all know, because you've probably gone through it. So what I wanted to do here today was share a little bit more of the data behind how Vermonters have fared the pandemic, first in relationship to the rest of the nation, and then through some county-by-county comparisons within the state of Vermont. To briefly clarify really quickly, a lot of this data will be discussed in per capita, and per capita essentially means per head, so it's a percentage calculated by comparing a part to a whole. So in this case, we're comparing the number of cases within a state or a county to the total population of that state or county. So that will help us normalize the data so that we can compare the effects of COVID across different populations without skewing our findings. So let's begin. So what we see here today are cases per capita by state. And these cases these states are characterized by darker, larger squares when the state has seen more cases. So you'll notice right off the bat that North Dakota and South Dakota stick out. And that's because these two states have seen some of the highest per capita caseloads in the nation. Whereas our state of Vermont is pretty hard to find on here. You'll find it right down here. And that's because related to the rest of the nation, we've had extremely low caseloads, and similar to Hawaii and Maine in that regard. Look a little bit more closely at this data. So let's first compare North Dakota with Vermont. And we can see here that North Dakota, over here, has a 12.8% per capita infection rate, which means essentially that for every 100 people in North Dakota, 12, or really 13 of them, have had or do currently have the novel coronavirus. By comparison, it's about 2 Vermonters that have had or currently have the coronavirus. So now that we've looked at the state that's probably doing the best out of the nation in the continental US, and the state that is struggling the most to combat the spread of the coronavirus, let's look a little bit more regionally for comparisons. So here we have our neighbor, New Hampshire, and you can see here that for every 100 people, almost 5 folks in New Hampshire have or currently have had or currently have the novel coronavirus. If you remember from that second slide with all of the blue boxes, we noted that Hawaii had a smaller box than Vermont. And the infection rate in Hawaii is actually 1.8%, so slightly less than our state of Vermont. And I would imagine that this is related to the fact that Hawaii could close down travel in a way that Vermont sadly is not able to do in order to protect its citizens. Let's compare to Maine, our regional friend and also a state with the 3rd lowest COVID infection rates. And so you see that it's only 1% higher than Vermont, and yet Maine has, almost triple the amount of cases that we've experienced in the state, and with about double the population overall. So it is definitely still a significant number more infected folks in the state. So now that we've situated our state within the national effort to reduce the contraction of COVID-19, let's take a look at how the state has functioned county by county so that we can get a better feel of how these more strict protocols that we've enforced have served the state, and despite that, how many cases and fatalities have still occurred within Vermont over the course of the pandemic. Okay, so let's first take a look at the overall trends in cases in Vermont. As you can see here, Chittenden County makes up what looks to be almost half of our donut graph here. So what we're looking at here is the distribution of overall cases in Vermont across Vermont's 14 counties. And it's clear that Chittenden County, the home of Burlington, which has the largest population, therefore would proportionally also have the largest number of cases. Now let's look at some of the remaining counties. As you can see, each of the counties has been associated with a specific color, and these colors will remain consistent throughout the next handful of slides so that we can continuously look at and compare these counties with different data sets. In particular, keep an eye out for the lime green of Chittenden County, this burnt pumpkin of Bennington County, and finally the bullfrog green of Franklin County over the next few slides. This visual shows the actual number of cases recorded in each county out of the total 11,831 reported cases in the state of Vermont. In Chittenden County, right here, we've had 805 reported cases so far. In Franklin, up here, 123, and then in Bennington, 108. Now, the total population of Chittenden is 163,774 people, while Franklin County is 49,402, and Bennington is 35,470 people. So let's look again at these cases per capita to better understand if there's a significant hierarchy to these infection rates per county. As we see on this next plot, with the cases distributed per capita, you can see that the rate of cases is really all within the same ballpark throughout the state. So that would be within about 1 to 3%, averaging to that 1.9% that we talked about earlier. And you can see here actually that Bennington County has the highest rate of infection, with 2.8% of their citizens getting COVID. So if 100 people in the state, you might have almost 3 that have had or currently have COVID, versus Chittenden, which is at 2.4%, Franklin County at 1.5%, and actually Caledonia down here, which is a county that I truly don't know that much about, has the lowest infection rate per capita in the state. Congratulations, Caledonia! So now that we understand how cases have been distributed throughout Vermont, let's get a better idea of how these cases have come about over time. So, at first this graph may look a little bit loud, but we're still looking at the exact same colors to designate the same counties. So you can see Chittenden County is pretty constant throughout with new cases, however very clearly spiking in the beginning of the pandemic and then in these colder winter months, with what you would expect of a distribution in the summer months and the warmer months, much less of an infection rate, and that goes for all of the counties in Vermont. So overall, this chart seems somewhat intuitive. When folks are able to be outside and socialize at a distance in the summer and hopefully, maintain working from home and such, then we have lower caseloads, whereas when folks are forced inside and perhaps becoming increasingly isolated and spending time with others, regardless of the protocols, then we have these spikes. And just to remind you, we have Bennington down here. This is Edison County. We've got Franklin County up here. And then interestingly, you see this anomaly here in this purple bit. And that is actually... Excuse my dog, I think you can hear him having a nightmare in the background. So we're looking at Washington County here, and this spike was actually caused by a dramatic 46 new cases reported in a single day here, due to or attributed to cross-state travel, social gatherings, and actually deer hunting camps, according to the local radio station WCAX3. Overall, though, I think what we see here is that day to day, the COVID infection rates kind of increase incrementally, and as a whole state. So when we are spiking, we're spiking as a state here, and increasingly more so as we enter 2021. In discussing how COVID has affected Vermont, of course, we also should discuss how COVID-19 related deaths have been distributed across the state. So note that this graph does not have a y-axis, so what we're looking at here is just the instances of COVID-19 deaths. We've had a total of 172 in the state, and you can see that it's a similar distribution to the number of cases over time, which also would make sense. So in the beginning of the pandemic, as we're still figuring out what it is and how to treat it, we see a significant amount of cases, especially in Chittenden County, and then we see scattered deaths, very few during the summer months, and then as we enter the winter, the colder months where people are stuck inside, and we have spiking infection rates, we also see spiking rates of COVID-19 related deaths in the state. And I'll just note here that the counties that are most represented, we can see clearly are Chittenden County, both in the initial COVID-related deaths and the more recent COVID-related deaths. We also see Franklin County. The light and dark purple are Washington and Windham County, respectively. And then we can see a few blips of Bennington County, but much more the first four noted. So now, in terms of county by county of COVID-19 related deaths, we can see Chittenden County here with a total of 80 lives lost to COVID-19. To the north, Franklin County has lost 34 residents. Washington County, with our capital of Montpelier, has lost 12 residents, and then we've also lost 10 residents down here in Windham. You may also have noticed that up north, the counties of Grand Isle to the west and Essex to the east have been able to see full recoveries in all of their COVID-19 cases to date. So overall as a state, while we have had 172 lives lost to COVID-19, which is a tragedy, we have done quite well, and I think that the best way to illustrate that is to go back and briefly compare the total deaths in Vermont to that of our nation. Of course, knowing that other states have fared worse than we have in this pandemic is tragic news. However, I hope that seeing how effective the measures that Vermont has taken to decrease the spread of this virus will be helpful in providing you that boost of determination that you may need to get through these final lonely, chilly months. We can see here that in terms of death per capita by state, we see a very similar trend to that of cases per capita by state. So again, unfortunately, North Dakota and South Dakota stick out due to their higher rates of loss of life due to COVID-19. Rhode Island also sticks out, as does Arizona. And you'll notice again that Vermont has done quite well by comparison, as has Maine and Hawaii. So in all of this, what I hope you'll walk away from this presentation with is a sense of how effective the measures that Vermont has taken to decrease the spread of this virus have been. And I hope that that understanding will provide you with a boost of determination to make it through these final lonely months before the vaccine can be distributed throughout the whole population. Our state is working really hard to vaccinate the most vulnerable in our communities, and hopefully one day in the near future, we'll all be vaccinated and able to return to socializing with our peers. In the meantime, I wish you all great health, fortitude, and give you the permission to engage in self-care. Take care of yourself in these hard times as we navigate these next few chilly months. It has been an absolute delight to be in class with you all this month. I wish you well.